Hi everyone, welcome to the Wild Apricot Bootcamp. My name is Coach Mark and I'm going to take you through 5 lessons about how you can learn to use Wild Apricot better. About myself, I've been with Wild Apricot for a few years now, and in my time I've helped thousands of communities to grow. You may have seen me at things like PersonaFest or any of the Personified Connections conferences, and if there's anything I can do to help, just reach out. As you're working with the bootcamp, you will see that you are able to ask questions directly to Wild Apricot. On the page you're on now, there are a number of different ways to get in touch with us, and I really encourage you to do it. We want to hear from you, we want to be able to answer your questions, and we want you to feel comfortable and confident. Also, each lesson does have a handout that you can download directly from this page. It's in PDF format, and inside that handout you'll see a copy of all the slides we use, plus links that you can click on to go directly to additional resources that are mentioned within the bootcamp. Once again, if you have any questions, just ask. Without further ado, let's get to today's lesson. And here's what we're going to cover today in today's lesson. A couple of important things, namely what is a member, what's a contact, what the difference is between a member and a contact, because that's a pretty big topic on Wild Apricot. We're also going to look at the actual membership types that you can create for your organization. Those are called levels on Wild Apricot, and we'll go about making a few of those. We'll also look at what kind of fields you can include as questions on the application. And what a field is that's exactly what I said, kind of like a question. You'll be able to ask your members to fill in certain parts of information when they're applying to your organization. We'll also talk about privacy, because that's a big important topic these days. We want you to know how you can go about setting your organization's privacy level and what options exist for your members themselves so that they can set their own individual privacy levels. And then part 2, we're going to look at the import wizard itself, how you can go about preparing information to bring into Wild Apricot, how you map it properly, how you ensure accuracy. And then I'm also going to touch a little bit on what you can and cannot import into Wild Apricot, just so everybody is on the same page. And of course, there'll be a bit of a Q&A for that as well. But before we get started, just in case there's anybody at all who feels super lost, I want to go through a really quick navigation lesson for Wild Apricot, where everything is, how you switch between admin and public views and why you'd want to do that, and where you can go to get help if needed. So quickly, logging in is simple. You only have to go to your Wild Apricot website, the same one that you started or the same one your organization uses, and you log in with the email and password that you use to sign up. And the reason is because that email and password is going to give you admin backend access, and you will be able to make some changes to the site that way. So a couple of the login forms will look like this. And the other way that you can log in is you can log in directly at wildapricot.com. There's a green button in the top right that will let you log in particular or specifically to your site. And that one's hard to miss, so it can be a good way to log in if you are lost in any way. I just want to show you really quickly where that is, as also an example of how I'm going to be sharing my screen so that you can see how I'm doing things on my end. So we'll just go over to the Wild Apricot website. You see here there's a button in the top right with login. If you click that, it'll bring up the login box, and you can go and log into Wild Apricot that way. It'll take you directly to your admin account on your site, and it's a really great way to get in. Now, finding your way around Wild Apricot can be kind of tricky, but it doesn't have to be. So there's a couple of things to know. Up here, you got the main menu. This is where all the major sections of Wild Apricot can be found. And right under that, you have the submenu. And that's, of course, contextual. So if you click something like dashboard in this example, then the options that will appear for dashboard will be overview, account, organization, referrals, etc. But if you went over and you clicked events, those options would be different. And of course, that's the easiest way to log in, or sorry, to navigate around Wild Apricot. Up here, this button is your account. This is where you can do things like make changes to your billing for Wild Apricot, or you can change your password. You can manage account administrators. This is also where you log out if you're using your computer from a public place and you want to make sure nobody has access. So it's good to know where that is as well. You also have up here the public view. You see this says public view button. And what this does is lets you switch between public views and admin views for your site. And the difference is the admin view is where you'll go about making changes, where you can add registration types or payments. And the public view is kind of what it looks like from the rest of the internet's perspective. So that's what your members would see. That's what people who visited your website would see. And that's where you can see the kind of changes you're making as well. And it's good to know that you can switch just by clicking that button. And then there are a couple things on the right that are really useful. There's help and tutorials. That's where you can get any more help, and it'll take you directly to the main help site as well. So that's the great place to start if you do have any questions or you find yourself stuck. And then you get the Wild Apricot Academy. This thing is really cool. This is where you can register and see the kind of information about how to grow your organization or how to attract more people via Facebook. These are advanced topics that are for people who are really curious about improving themselves and the way their organization works. And clicking that button will take you right over to where we have expert webinars and other information that will really help you out in that regard. So do check that out. And then lastly, there's the feedback button. This is because we like to hear from you, and we really develop the software based on what people are asking for. So anytime you have an idea, thoughts, concerns, comments, please do use the feedback button. We really put it there on purpose. We want to hear back from you quick. And then finally, just in case there's anybody in your organization who doesn't know their way around and they weren't able to attend this meeting, the Getting Started video can be really helpful, and it can be really useful as a refresher. So this bootcamp, of course, will be much more extensive, but if you are looking for any sort of refresher at a later date, going to Dashboard and Getting Started will really help you out. So I'll just show you quickly where all of that is so that everybody's on the exact same page. Won't spend too much time, as a lot of you are existing customers and you don't need the too much of a refresher, but you'll see here we have the dashboard, the contacts, website, events, etc. So that's your main menu. And if you went and click something like website, then the submenu would change to show you the kind of topics that you can use under website. So here you have site pages, you have files, theme, etc., etc. And that, of course, changes depending on where you are. The other one I wanted to point out quickly is that you have the account button up here, and that's where you can manage your actual Wild Apricot account. And then that last button that I want to make sure everybody knows how to use is the public view / admin view button. So right now we're in that admin view, and if I were to go and click this button for public view, you'll see it will take me to the public facing side of the site. Now this is just a brand new sample website that I opened on the Wild Apricot website just a moment ago, so it's really not built too much, and it just has these cute little monkeys with a nice haircut. But otherwise, this is what public would see if they went to my website. And if I made changes, they would appear here and I can go see them. And if I wanted to change something on the admin side, I just click up here in the top right where it says admin view. And that will, of course, take us right back to the admin side of the site. So nothing too complicated. Hopefully everybody can find their way around. And of course, this will be in the handout so you can review it later and share with colleagues if needed. And let's move forward with what I have planned for the actual content for today's lesson. So part one is going to be managing your database, and that's referring to how to create membership levels and privacy and member groups, all that fun stuff I was mentioning before. So the main things we're going to cover, just as a quick reiteration, are contacts versus members. That's a really big one. We're going to look at new fields. That's new questions and new pieces of information you're collecting for each person in your database. I'm going to show you how to add them and how to delete them in case you have to make some changes later. We're also going to be talking about the membership groups because I think they are very underutilized and they can really help you organize things for the future. You can send emails to member groups. You can give specific page access to member groups. So using those member groups will really help you out a lot long term. We'll also look at the membership application form itself so that everybody knows how they can customize it, how they can place one, how they can create it. It can be quite simple as well, so I'll show you that. And of course, the different types of membership, namely, you got your individual membership, you got a bundle membership. What is a bundle membership? I'll tell you all about what that means in just a second. First and foremost, though, let's talk about the difference between a member and a contact. So really quickly, everybody in your Wild Apricot database is a contact. You can think of it kind of like a Rolodex, if anybody remembers those, or like a phone book in a way. Everybody whose entry is in there is a contact, whether they have a membership or not. Like, your organization may have sponsors, it may have guests, it may have partners or other people that it just corresponds with, but doesn't necessarily sell an actual subscription or membership to. So this is useful for two reasons. One, you can kind of think about how much space you would need in your Wild Apricot account, or if you need to go to a larger account to accommodate more people as contacts. And the other reason that it's really useful is that knowing that members are also contacts can really help you plan for the future. And you can see some of the things that members can do here on part 3. Members can have members-only pages, they can appear in the directory, they get to take advantage of store discounts, and they can also be organized into member groups, and I mentioned that a couple of times. We're going to be talking about how you can do that. And of course, members will pay dues, and that's what a lot of you, I hope, are at least primarily focused on, because that's what Wild Apricot is the best at managing the automated dues renewal process. And just checking the questions every now and again to make sure nothing new has come in. And this is an example of one of those special pages that I've included in the handout. And you can see here that these bright blue links are things that will take you directly to help pages or videos on our help site. So for example, if you do get confused about what a member is and what a contact is, this is going to take you to a page that I handpicked because I think it is the most explicative and will absolutely help clear things up for you. At the bottom here, you'll also notice the membership setup checklist. That's something I really think is important. That's a checklist done by the people in technical support who have gone through almost everything that the average user will encounter in terms of setting memberships up, and it will take you through them one by one to make sure that it's looking good on your end. So I highly recommend it, but that's something you can do at the end of the bootcamp. Now, member levels, I've mentioned that a couple of times, and what that is referring to is the different types of membership that you can offer. A good way to think of it is in the example that I've put here as a picture. You can kind of have like a bronze membership, a silver membership, a gold one. There's no limit, in fact, to the different types of membership levels that you can actually offer. So if you have more and your organization uses more types, then go ahead and put them in. Likewise, if you only have one, that's perfectly fine too. You would need a minimum of one, but that's all you really have to think about. So member levels themselves can have custom names, custom costs. You can set the specific renewal date. So whether that's a join or the same date that somebody joined the organization, or if it's something like the 1st of every month. And of course, for each individual member level, you can set a welcome email, a renewal email, activation emails, all sorts of types of automation. So I'm going to show you all about how to do that. And of course, these are those useful links that you will be able to use after the presentation here when you're looking at the handout itself. And let's just look at the questions really quickly. Can there be, I got a couple in about a company has 6 members in their gold level subscription. Yeah, so somebody's asking if there's such a membership that can have multiple people per type of membership. And yes, that's absolutely possible in Wild Apricot. We call it bundle memberships, and I'm going to be touching on it in just a moment. So all of that is actually really possible, which is why I thought this would be really useful to learn. And here we go. Let's go look at some of the options that are available. So the examples that I have here, I have 3 of them that I think are the most common and commonly experienced on Wild Apricot. On the far left, you have just a standard individual membership. And just as an example, we have it set for $100 a year. That's for one person. You know, that's a standard example of how you can create an individual membership. But to answer the questions that are coming in from a couple of you, as well as anything that may be going through your mind, yes, you can get a little bit fancy and make some cool bundle membership options. So the one I have here for a family membership, that would be $100 a year. How it would work is you'd have one person as the bundle administrator who would basically be acting as the principal for that account. They get to decide who has the additional memberships under them. They would be the ones paying the dues, and they can add or remove people from that family membership as needed. So in this example, if we were trying to get an entire family as members, we could have one administrator, so mama or papa maybe, and then you have 5 bundled members under, so that's the rest of the family. You know, boy, girl, dog, grandma, whatever it is, they'll all be able to be assigned memberships under one of these types of membership structures that you create. And of course, the other way that that works is if you think about corporate or group memberships, because then you could have something like $100 a year, and it would still need one bundle administrator to be able to add everybody else. But then you could use it unlimitedly. So you could do something like sell a membership to a company like, I don't know, Microsoft. Microsoft would have a $100 a year membership. One person in their organization would be the primary contact, just for billing purposes, but also to add users. And then they could give it to everybody else in that organization, all the other staff there, and they would all share that same membership. So this is useful for those of you who are in business improvement organizations, or you mainly deal with other corporations or companies. The corporate group memberships, which also are called bundle memberships, are definitely possible. Very easy to set up, and of course I want to show you that in the program itself. And just quickly, we had a quick question that I actually think is a great question. If a membership if a membership type includes an initiation fee or a one-time setup, how would we go about doing that? I think I can answer both, maybe in the same example, but let's do one at a time because I know definitely I will be able to touch on that. So switching over to my other screen, this is just a brand new account that I really just started about 25 minutes ago. It's called Bootcamp. It's just a test, and we're all familiar with this Getting Started page. By the way, if you don't want this page to show up when you are starting your website, there's a little option down here in the bottom left. You'll see it says always open this page when I log in. And I know somebody did ask about how they can stop seeing this Getting Started page. So all you have to do is unclick this, and then it will stop showing up on this site itself. Let's just give ourselves a little bit more room here. Perfect. Okay, now, if I'd like to go about making a membership type, how do I do that? Well, let's go over to members in the main menu bar, and then underneath we go to levels. And you see here that because this is a sample site, that we have some sample values. Right now there's a sample premium membership and a sample regular membership. And those are just kind of basic placeholders that are automatically included with the Wild Apricot template, just so you can see what is possible and that you don't look at an empty page. But if we want to go ahead and add a new one, let's just click Add Level up here in the top left. And then you see that we have this screen where we can define the terms of the membership. So let's call this one Bootcamp membership. And let's make this a bundled one because I think the individual one is pretty self-explanatory. It's not too complicated to think about. So let's try and play around with this bundle one and see what's possible. So we select the bundle type, and we're going to limit this to 500 members. No, sure, 5,000 members only. It's a very exclusive club, and of course, all of you are invited. The membership fee for this, let's just approximate what I think Bootcamp is approximately worth. I'd say about $75,000. That seems about right to me. I think you folks are getting quite the discount. And then of course you have some other options here. You have the ability to apply tax settings, which of course you can set for your organization to automatically deduct a certain fee or add a certain fee to each membership type. And you have payment methods. Right now we're dealing with offline only. We haven't set up our online payments yet. That's going to be tomorrow. So for now, we'll just put a little description. This is for Bootcamp members. Over here, sorry, we're done with the description. I have nothing to add there. Up here on the top right, you have a couple of other options, and I'll quickly explain what these are as well. Where it says public can apply, this means quite literally that if you have this checked, then somebody from the general public could go to your site, see this Bootcamp membership option, and go ahead and apply for it. So if any of you want to do that, just for a reminder, it is worth $75,000, so have your credit card ready. The second one is the member can change to, and this one is commonly confused, so I thought I'd touch on it. If you want your members to be able to, let's say, upgrade or downgrade their membership, then you'll want this option checked, because this means that the member can change their membership to either of these other options. So if you have a VIP package, for example, you might want it so that people can upgrade to that VIP package. You'll want to use this option here so that people can actually do it from their own profile. They'll just have to log into the site. They'll have the option right then and there. But this lets you enable it or disable it from the administrator's point of view. And of course, just a couple of other quick things you'll see on the membership level that we're on, or when we are creating a membership level, you have the general, that's where we are now. Then you have renewal policies and new applications. Let's just go over to renewal policies to quickly look what that see what that looks like. Up here you have the renewal period itself. You can see that it's currently set to never, but if we wanted it to be twice a year, so every 6 months, we could just select that. And then you can either make it by the rolling join date, or you can make it a specific date. And what's kind of neat about making it a specific date is that it will prorate memberships for people. So if there's only 4 weeks left on a 6-month membership, then it will bill them appropriately for only those 4 weeks, not the entire 6 months. Now, of course, you don't have to turn that on, and you can really play with this to make the exact terms as needed. And the reason I'm showing you this is because a lot of people have subscriptions, not necessarily memberships, and they are relying on those subscriptions for monetary reasons. And I want you to see that you have the option of making monthlies with specific join dates, and you can really get custom on how you want that to appear. And I won't spend too much time on this because I think a lot of this does make sense, but you will see that down here you have renewal reminders and actions. So for example, in this one, 14 days before the renewal date of this membership, you have the option of generating an invoice automatically. You can email the invoice automatically, or you can send it to certain people such as the bundle member or the bundle administrator or the organization contact altogether. You have a bunch of options here. And these blue links that you notice on Wild Apricot, these can be clicked and they will take you to a page where you can customize exactly how that renewal reminder will look. And that's why I'm saying that you can really get fancy with how you want your organization to represent itself to your members. Because if you're sending them a renewal link, you might want your logo on there. You might want a friendly little message. So you can go ahead and edit them right here and here. And there are a couple of places, there are a couple of renewal reminders. So let's just go back to our bootcamp membership that we were playing with, and we'll go down to the renewal policy again. You'll see that you have a number of options here, and you can set which date this will go out on. So 14 days, we can change that to 9 days. We could change this one to 4 days before the renewal date. And then there's one on the renewal date itself. Then you also have what are, I suppose, the not so good options. Hopefully people don't fall into these, but if it's not renewed within 7 days, you can do things like change the renewal period, change the membership level, so you could downgrade it to one that's not as good as the one they were using previous. And of course, eventually, if you go all the way down the list, you have the option of going ahead and just suspending the membership altogether, or you can even archive it if you never expect to see that person again. So you can really get custom and specific with how you want to present things out here. Okay, so if you are curious about those common versus specialized fields, otherwise known as member fields in this case, then I have a bunch of help site articles here that will help you out very well. There's also one in particular called setting up the membership application form. So if you find yourself a little bit of difficulty setting that form up to look the way that you want it, then check out that help site page article. And of course, here's the membership setup checklist again, because it is so good and it will really help you through basically everything we're talking about here today. So I really can't recommend it enough. And I apologize for hammering it in there, but you'll hopefully thank me when it helps you out. So it's there as well. Okay. Now, speaking of membership application forms, you do have the ability to create forms with different styles and different questions, but different style options for those questions themselves. And as an example, if we were creating a common field and we created a new field, then you'll see that it will ask for the type of field that you actually want to use. You have different options there. You have a regular text field, you have multi-line text. So if you want to have 3 or 4 different lines down in a row there, you could do that for questions as well. You also have multiple choice, which is exactly what it says. It allows people to select multiple choices of things. And you have radio buttons. This one's a little bit confusing sometimes. Radio buttons are kind of like multiple choice, except you can only select one possible answer. So that's what the difference would be there, and that's how you can segment them appropriately. You also have a drop-down picture. You have a rules and terms field. And that's kind of like when you click onto a website and it says, you must accept our rules or our privacy policy before you can go forward. You actually have the ability to custom make your own rules and terms and be able to have it a required field so that people can't go any farther unless they accept them. So for many of you, especially charity organizations, that's a pretty big one. And of course, you could have a date and a section divider as well. And this is a pretty big screen with a lot of info, but it does detail exactly what each different type of field does. And of course, it's usually the multiple choice and the radio buttons that get a little bit confusing for people, but hopefully this will help you through that. I put a bunch of descriptions on what they do here beside each different type of field, but there's a lot of info here and I really don't want to bombard you too much. So if you are curious about any of these and you want additional help, either check the help site or just play and test around with it yourself, or you can check the handout, which has this exact slide on it. And it, of course, has all of the descriptions. And in the handout, you have all about member levels, you have how to add members manually, and of course, one last time, you have that membership setup checklist, just in case you are looking to implement anything you see here on your own site. So we'll just go back into this trial account that I have set up or by default, and we'll go to contacts in the top, and we'll go to common fields as the submenu option. And you see here that there are a couple pre-built into Wild Apricot. This is just because these are quite common, and we didn't want you just to look at a plain empty site. We wanted you to be able to see some examples of what can be done. And you see here we have privacy policy, phone, email, organization, etc. But if we have a first name and a last name field, so what if we want a middle name field? Let's try adding that. We'll click Add New Field. And you see this screen with all of the different types of field that we can put in there. And that's things like text or multi-line text. So that's if you have a bigger paragraph. You have multiple choice, you have radio buttons, you got a drop down, and you can see all of the options here. I think for the middle name, we'll probably just use text because it will be the easiest. And field label, that's where you title the name of the field itself. This one will be called middle name. We'll make it a required field. And if you want, you can make it for administrator access only, which basically takes it out of the public consumption, and it will only be able to be seen by administrators. Even the members themselves will not be able to go back in time and change this option. So this is kind of like a one-time push of information up to your admins, and this is where it can be really useful for applications if you need to know things like more private information like SIN numbers or Social Security. I'm not sure what your organization would need those for, but if you did, it's a good way to make sure that they would be private and locked down this way. And then finally, if we decheck that, we have the option of making it accessible to others. So you can see that it would be accessible to anybody, just to members, or to nobody except the person themselves, the contact themselves. They would of course be able to see their own information, but others would not. So that's it. We're just going to go ahead and save changes for this. Now you can see we have the middle name field down here. If I want it to appear in a different place on my site, I'll just drag it and just pull it up. So now it will appear between first name and last name. And that way, if somebody goes and creates a membership application on my site, well, then they're going to see not only is it asking for their first and last name, but now it's going to ask them for their middle name. And because we made it a required field, they have to answer it. So if you don't have a middle name, I'm sorry, I don't think you can be part of the boot camp. Although you could just, I suppose, make one up. I'm not that strict. I like to think I'm an easygoing teacher. So we'll just save changes for that. I'm getting a couple questions here, and I think this is a pretty good one, so I'm going to address it. When you add a custom field like middle name, how can you make it searchable? Well, I suppose my follow-up question is, where would you like to be able to see that? But more importantly, yes, you can absolutely make it searchable. In fact, any sort of information you put into Wild Apricot can absolutely be searched later and drilled down specifically. So I'll give you just a quick example. And bear in mind, we don't have a lot of info in our site here, so we won't actually be able to pull up many searches. But if I go to advanced search here, and I do something like add criteria, you'll see that over here where it says contact related, we now have this middle name field that we added. So if I want to be able to search everybody's middle name, I can come here, select middle name, click OK. And then I have options down here. So middle name is not empty. And of course we could save that just so we could run it later. This is now called the middle name search. And then you would just hit the button. So that's how you do it on the admin back end of things. But the same actually also works for things like the member directory, or if you're searching for member registrations for events. And of course, we'll touch on all that as the week goes on, but suffice to say, yes, you will be able to do that. So on Wild Apricot, you actually have two levels of control over data, information, and privacy. Things can be set for visibility both on the admin side of things, and then a member can individually select their own preferences for things as well. And how that actually ends up looking is kind of on this example. You see that if you take the top option there, the photo album, the admin has the view to set their the privacy for that to anybody, so that any public user can potentially see that photo album. They can set it so that only other members who are logged in can see that photo album. And of course, you have the ability to set it so that it has no access, so only the administrator and the individual themselves can see that particular piece of information. And members will have the ability to adjust their own privacy. Admins can set it as a default level for the rest of the site. And with those combined, you really enable a lot of control over privacy settings on your account. People don't necessarily have to show their phone number if they don't want to, for example. Somebody who is no longer accepting new business can hide their email address from others on the site. Just have a lot of use there, and it's important for both you, the admins, to know that you can do this, and also for you to communicate to your members that they can absolutely set their own privacy if needed. And we just have some information here about Wild Apricot's privacy policy, what we do with your information, how we protect it. The short answer there is that your information is owned by you. You're basically just using us to be able to house it and display it on different ways. All of the information is always yours. You always have access. We don't keep anything if you delete it. It's all basically your control at all times. We're just your service provider. And also how to set up membership privacy settings on Wild Apricot itself. That's another link I have here in the handout. But otherwise, let's go jump into Wild Apricot so I can show you where you can set these settings in 2 different places. I'm going to go over to Members, and then I'm going to go to Other Settings. And you can see here that in the Other Settings, about 3 options down the list, I have Privacy. Now here I have the membership privacy settings as an overview of what is currently set and what is enabled and what isn't. You can see here that under no access, there are a couple of fields listed. The user ID, for example, is currently set to not be accessible. That means that the only people who can see this particular piece of information are the user themselves plus the admin. No other members can see it. Nobody from the public can see it. Likewise with the avatar, currently nobody can see it except the user and the admin. However, for something like the email address, it's currently listed to be able to be seen by anybody. So if somebody does input an email address, anybody, including public or other members, can potentially see it. And if you edit this page, you can actually set each individual field separately. So if we wanted to change the avatar so that it's available to members only, we wanted to change membership level so that it is also available to members only, and we want to change email so that nobody has access except the member and the admin, we can go ahead and do that. And we'll just hit save. Now we have the ability to actually change existing records or just leave the existing records alone. So if we wanted to make a retroactive change, and now that we've made the avatar available to other members, we can go ahead and apply to all records. And it will just confirm, oops. We'll ask you to confirm your choice there, especially because you could potentially be setting something that somebody has done individually. So do be careful if you're using this. It's best when you're doing tests only or for some information that you're making a retroactive change that everybody is aware of and everybody is comfortable with. Otherwise, now the avatar is available to members only, which means other members can see it if you do have an avatar actually uploaded. And where you can set these settings as a member too, as well. So if I go back to public view, oh, actually, I'm not a member on my own site yet because I haven't approved my own application. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to members, let's go to summary. We have 1 pending application for the Bootcamp Bronze membership. And that, of course, is me, Bootcamp Mark. I'll click my record. I'm going to go ahead and activate my membership. There you go. We don't have to pay the invoice, but we are an active member, and you can see that here, membership status active. So now I'll go back to the public view, and now that I am a fully fledged member of the Wild Apricot test site, I'm going to go ahead and click into my profile. So I'm going to click View Profile. And here's where I can set my own individual member privacy settings. So otherwise I have my profile, I could edit it and add or remove information if needed. But over here next to the profile tab, you have the privacy tab, which brings up kind of the same screen as before, except this doesn't change it for anybody else but me. If I wanted to completely hide myself from the rest of the world, I can click no access on everything else. I'll go ahead and click save. And now basically nobody will be able to see any of my information on this site. I'd be as private as a member as possibly could be. The only people who would have this information are the admins, and I can still enjoy all of the full functionality of the site. I just won't have any of my information listed. So it's a really good way to give members control over what they want, and depending on how your organization is set up, a lot of people may end up using this, or they may not. They may want to stay as social as possible and list their information to everybody all the time. It really comes down to what you need, what your members need, and what you enable them to do. As you can see on Wild Apricot, you are certainly able and capable of doing a lot of specific privacy flexibility. Okay, so hopefully that answers a lot of questions about the member privacy there. Let's jump back into the presentation. Okay, so member groups are very, very useful, and by default we include the example board members because that's the one that I think makes the most sense to the average person just starting Wild Apricot. But you can really use these for any sort of group that you need to have segmented. For example, volunteers or your staff. Maybe you have VIP members that are in their own group, or maybe you have just people who are helping out at the next barbecue and you want them to be in a membership group so that you can do things like contact them or give them their own page that nobody else can access, just this member group. And I think this is really useful, especially when it comes down to getting your emails off quickly, because you can send a quick email to a specific group and not have to worry about any sort of recipient list. It'll just go straight to that group. So I'm going to show you where you can do this. And of course, this has all of the information on the help site as well that you can review after the bootcamp. Go and experiment right after our bootcamp today. So to set up a group, you go to members in the main menu section. You scroll down to groups. And you'll see that the sample one that on my website here is board members. Many of you probably have a couple set up already, but it's quite easy to set up a third one at any time. So we'll call this one the Bootcamp Crew, just like the Bootcamp membership that we had before, for all the interesting people who are in the bootcamp. We'll save that. And that's kind of as simple as it needs to be. If we click Bootcamp Crew, now that it's created, we can do things like manage the participants for that group. So we click Manage Participants, and you'll see that there are a couple members here, just as sample in the system, but we want to make them both a part of that group. So we'll just add them over into the Bootcamp Crew. We'll save all changes. And now, as you can see, there are 2 participants in the Bootcamp Crew, and anytime I need to message these people or see who the participants are, I can just click something like this. It'll show me exactly who is part of this Bootcamp Crew. And you'll see up here at the top that you have the button that I like to think is the most useful button on Wild Apricot. It's when you look at something like a member group, you can email all of those members specifically. So this is why you do things like save searches. This is why you do things like review your groups like this, because you can very, very quickly send out a message to just these 2 users, or let's say the 200 users. It doesn't really matter. You could very quickly send one out just by going to that screen and being able to use that button. So I won't actually send an email out now. That's for Wednesday, and I think we're running a little slow on time anyway. Okay, when it comes to importing information, there's a couple of things that you really want to remember on Wild Apricot, namely that preparing your spreadsheet of information is probably one of the more important parts, because Wild Apricot itself will help you through the mapping process pretty well. So if you are preparing your spreadsheet and you are doing a couple of things like making sure your dates are all standardized and there's no extra spaces, then you really won't have too many difficulties when it actually comes time to import it into Wild Apricot. And last but not least, you can definitely start over if needed. So if you are a brand new user and you're trying to import your database, but it just came out as pure gobbledygook, and you're saying to yourself, wow, this is a mess, I've just made things worse. Don't worry, you can start over if needed by deleting your contacts and then going ahead and importing them again. That's definitely an option, and I don't think anybody gets it right the very first try, so don't feel too bad. Even myself, when I'm doing this, I often need to import more than once just to make sure that it's 100% accurate, because 95% accuracy really doesn't cut it. So once again, you can definitely start over if needed. And down the line, especially those of you who are on existing accounts and you're new admins, you can edit records in bulk. It's kind of the same method as bringing in new information altogether. You're basically working with a spreadsheet, making your changes there, and then importing it into Wild Apricot. But of course, Wild Apricot will take things and it will override changes if you want it to. So if you accidentally put everybody's country into the city field by accident, and it's saying that everybody is from the city of United States of America, you can go ahead and change that, update how it looks in your spreadsheet, move out all of that information over to the correct column so it's in the country column and not the city column, and then import that information and have it update on Wild Apricot and correct all of the information. So that's definitely possible. And of course, if you do need any help with that, just let us know. But otherwise, there are a bunch of help site articles about that. We don't want anybody to be working with the city of United States of America or city of Canada. We want you to be working with the country of Canada and the country of United States of America. So don't worry, we'll get you in the right place there. And of course, you'll be able to review any imports you do, including any errors. So if something did go amiss and the system wasn't sure what to do with a piece of information, it will tell you exactly which piece of information it was having difficulty reconciling. And that's really going to help you to go about fixing it and making sure that everything goes well and swimmingly the second time around. So the best ways to prepare for your actual import are to do things like move all of your existing data into a spreadsheet. And for those of you who are migrating off of an old database or moving your site from one place to the other, the first thing you want to do is basically export all of the data that you're actually working with currently, put everything you have into one spreadsheet. And the reason for that is that Wild Apricot can only import from one spreadsheet at a time. So if you're working from one sheet and you have everything organized there and you're making the changes in one place and one place only, it's going to keep you as likely as possible to actually be able to get everything back into Wild Apricot as easily as possible. So it's just my personal recommendation. If you want to work with from 10 different spreadsheets and upload 10 times, that's fine. That's perfectly up to you. That's why apples are apples and oranges are oranges. I just want you to know that it can only do one at a time. So if you want to stay as organized as possible, I definitely recommend sticking to one spreadsheet. Otherwise, another thing you definitely want to do is to standardize your date formats. Sure, we can all imagine how difficult it might be if it's July 7th and we are unsure of which column is the month and the date. You can't just have 7/7/2018. That's going to be confusing for people who aren't currently on July 7th as a date. So you want to make sure that you're using the same date format everywhere in your spreadsheet, be that day, month, year, month, day, year, or you have it spelled out like I have in the example here. You have the day and then a description of the month and then the year. All of these are fine. You just have to standardize it so that every time that you're using a date in your spreadsheet, they all look the same way. And there's actually a lot of quick ways you can do that on something like Microsoft Excel or on Google Sheets. If you are curious, just send us an email. We can definitely help you get that done quickly. There's a couple of macros that you can run, but otherwise it's pretty simple, and just make sure that you have it all standardized. So there's a really good way of preparing your spreadsheet that's a little bit easier than having to match everything up and sort of muddle your way through on yourself, and that's by exporting the data from Wild Apricot with all fields. And the reason being is that it will create a spreadsheet that have all of the system fields, all of your information already prepared into different columns that obviously will work well on Wild Apricot. That way you can just add your info to that particular spreadsheet, those columns and that planning, and that will help you to get things back over to Wild Apricot really, really quickly. And how you go about doing that is by going to Contacts and then List, and then there's a button called Export. You just click Export and it will ask what fields you actually want to take out of the database. If you're doing this method here, I recommend taking all of them out of the database. It's going to give you a copy of that information in the form of an Excel file or a CSV file. And then you can go about making your changes and re-importing them. So I have a bunch of useful links just about how to do all of this, including something new. We're not looking at the membership setup checklist anymore. We're looking at the import checklist, and it too is really good. It's so good that I really thought I would highlight it here. That's how good it is. So if you're brand new and you're on a trial account and you're trying to get your data into Wild Apricot, definitely check out this import checklist. Otherwise, I want to show you really quickly how you can export that information so that you can use it if needed. You can see here that we're working with the level lists or the membership levels that we were working with just a few minutes ago. But if I wanted to be able to export all of the information I have on my Wild Apricot site, I'll go to Contacts, then I'll go to List. I'll click this green button called Export. And you'll see that will ask me which fields I want to take out of Wild Apricot and put into a spreadsheet. And if we scroll down just a little bit, you can see that there are a ton of fields here that your organization may not have added when you imported information, but that still exist on Wild Apricot. Things like member emails and newsletters, well, that will be the opt-in preference, whether somebody has opted in to Wild Apricot or to your organization, sending them things like newsletters. They'll have their own ability to be able to opt in or out of that on their email settings. And so you can bring that out and be able to see whether yes or no people have opted in or out. Likewise, you can see things like, if we scroll down a little bit farther, we can see things like their membership level last changed on a certain date. You'll be able to bring that information out. So there is actually a ton of information on Wild Apricot that your organization may not have put in, but by doing this export method, you will be able to work with it all. And there you go. You can see that we actually have the export file here. And if we wanted to take this as a sample and then go about adding our info to it, we absolutely could. So I recommend that as a method if you are importing information for the very first time onto Wild Apricot, or if you're making bulk changes, that will also be a really good way to do it because it brings all of the info out of your account so that you can see it, make the changes, and then import it back in. Okay. Now, the import checklist. I mentioned how good this piece of information is, but I just want to run through it quickly here so that everybody will know what they're looking at if they come to it. So it goes through 6 steps on how to import your information into Wild Apricot. The first one is to use only one sheet for your spreadsheet. We did talk about that, and it's because Wild Apricot can only import one sheet at a time. So don't have the example like we're looking at the top here. Have the example like at the bottom. Having one single sheet is the best way to go forward. Next, you'll want to remove any extra rows that are in that spreadsheet. And of course, these are pretty easy to spot, but if you have extra blank rows, especially at the top of your spreadsheet, it's really going to muck things up in the future. So what you want to do is make sure that the first row is the name of your individual columns, the names of the types of information that you're importing into Wild Apricot. Next, you want to check those column headers to make sure that they actually make sense to you and that they apply to the information that is underneath them. At the end of the day, you'll be able to import these into Wild Apricot, and you can either do them exactly as they're written, or you can try and match them up to internal things on Wild Apricot, like member since, for example. If that's titled differently on your spreadsheet, like you had joined the organization, if you had that as a column header, then when it goes into Wild Apricot, you'll want to match it into the field internally that's known as member since. But of course, you'll have the option to do that. So you just want to double check your information, check the column headers. If there's any changes you can make, good. If you miss any, that's okay too. You have another chance to review it later. Now the cell values, you'll actually want to double check the cell values for a couple of those things that I mentioned, namely the date format. You'll want that to be standardized, and you'll want to make sure that it's the same for all different people, all the different users that you have. Also, the cell contents are formatted themselves so that there's no extra spaces or anything. Everything kind of looks the same, and so the system doesn't find anything that it's not expecting when you go about doing your import. And there's a couple of day, month, year formats, month, day, year, etc. Wild Apricot's actually pretty versatile when it comes to handling date formats. They just have to be standardized. That's the best way to ensure accuracy going forward. Now, you're probably going to have your own unique fields, like we used the example of a sailing or a yacht club earlier, asking people what size boat they have. And that's perfectly okay, because you can actually import that information into Wild Apricot too. It will go about creating new field types on your account. And of course, you can bring any information that you do have into your database that way. So as a consequence, not every spreadsheet's going to look the exact same. And if yours doesn't look like this, that's okay. It's more about making sure the information is accurate than the actual titles or the formatting looks the exact same as this example. So as long as the information is all for each column it makes sense and it has the same standardized dates and the same format, no extra spaces, then you'll be perfectly fine. So don't go about trying to match this example, just go about learning from why we're making things look this way. And once you've done that, you can actually take your file and begin to step through the import wizard. And Wild Apricot has an import wizard that will help you through the process of mapping your data and making sure it gets to the right place. And of course, that's in contacts and then import. That will help you choose a file. And then you'll get to the process where you'll see the mapping phase. And what the mapping phase does is takes your data and we'll put it into Wild Apricot into specific sections that you tell the program to do. And you'll see a lot of information here, so hopefully I can clear some up. This particular example, user ID, this is the name of the field as it appears on your spreadsheet. So whatever information you have in different columns on your Excel file, this is what will appear on the left part of the mapping phase. The three examples underneath that on the left part are examples of data that you actually have on your spreadsheet. They'll be in light gray, and you can see that they will give you examples of three things the system is looking for, and when it is processing this last name field from your spreadsheet. So it's more just so that you can review and make sure everything looks according to how you intended it, and also this way you'll be able to see examples of what will go into the system if you do import that information. And I say if you import that information because you have the ability to ignore or import different fields of information as well. If you unselect this box and you do not import the information, then this particular column will not go into Wild Apricot. And you might be asking yourself, why would I not want to import something? Well, the answer to that is if you're making a bulk change to everybody's account all at once, then you don't have to import data you already have. Or maybe you just want to correct one particular thing on your Wild Apricot account, so you can unselect everything except email because you'll want to associate the same email address, and then you can bring in the new data into Wild Apricot. So that might be down the road something that you are looking at, and of course I'm going to review that on Friday as well during the extra tips and tricks, but otherwise, just so that you know it's possible, you can see that here. And then finally on the right, you have where Wild Apricot will import your data to. So you can see in many cases, for example, user ID is going to user ID, first name is going to first name, but down here, when you import a membership level, you have some additional options. You can add new levels into the system for new values that are found in your spreadsheet that don't already exist in Wild Apricot, or you can ignore those values and just correct them later, or maybe just forego those particular membership levels. So you have the ability to bring people into existing membership levels, to bring them into brand new ones, or to just bring them in as regular contacts. And all of that can be done during the mapping phase. Likewise, if you try to import a column of information that doesn't exist on Wild Apricot yet, well, then you're going to get this screen, and you can actually change the selection yourself. So state and province, that's not something that was by nature or naturally in Wild Apricot, but we do want to bring that information in. So what we can do here is create a new field for all contacts, or a new field only for members. If we don't want to do either of those, we can try and match it into something else on Wild Apricot, but if we don't want to override something and we want that to be brand new information, just make sure you select new field. When you put it all together, it's a pretty complicated screen, but it's actually a very easy process. You can kind of think of it as a three-step thing. You confirm the data, you select whether or not you'd like to import it, and then you just choose where it's actually mapping itself to. And when you put it, when you actually go through this, it will take you through or it will automatically go through all the information you have imported into Wild Apricot. It will map everything out, and then you'll be able to review it. If there were any errors or if there was anything that went wrong, you'll be able to see. Otherwise, you'll see that there were no errors and there were 100 new accounts created. So that's the last step of the import wizard. It will show you exactly that summary screen about what happened. It will show you how many errors, what time the import was. You can also add notes as to who in the organization was completing this import and for what purpose. That way you have something of a quality control where you can see that such and such treasurer went in and updated everybody's information about what state they're in. So it just keeps your organization focused, and it keeps things accountable a little bit on your end. Otherwise, that's it. And we're going to go and do an example of that on my actual Wild Apricot account in just a second. But otherwise, you have some more information here on the actual handout. So if you do want more information about anything that we just spoke about with the importing, go ahead and check this out in the handout itself. I'm going to go ahead and import it into the test site that we've been working with. So what I'm going to do is go over to contacts. Then I'm going to click import. And of course, it's going to ask us to choose a file. So I will select the spreadsheet that we are working, or that I've prepared for this demonstration. And we're going to hit upload. Very first question it asks is whether the first row is a header. 99% of the time it will be, especially if you have all of your column headers in row 1. I really recommend it, and in this example it is, so we're just going to hit next. And now we'll see that dreaded mapping screen, which hopefully is a lot less scary this time around. You can see even in the example of this sample spreadsheet that first name is going to first name on Wild Apricot, last name is going to last name on Wild Apricot, but already the system is unsure of what to do with this custom field I've created called salutation. So if we do want this field to be brought into the system, we have to make sure import is checked. And then, because there is no field called salutation on Wild Apricot, we have the option of either creating a new field for all contacts, just for members, or trying to fit it somewhere else. Maybe there is some slight terminology change and there actually is an option that exists on Wild Apricot. Although for this one, we're going to use new field for all contacts. That field is going to be called salutation. The field type is going to be text because, as you can see in the examples, these are really just things like master or miss or Mr. And we just want to be polite when we're speaking to people. And it's not for internal use only because we're going to be using this a lot in emails and registrations. So we're going to leave that unchecked. And then as you go down the mapping list, you'll see that most other options, Wild Apricot will do its best to try and match all of your options. It's only if it can't. For example, it doesn't know how to decide where renewal date should go. So I do want those renewal dates. So I'm going to click import. This one is not a new field because I know that there is a renewal function in Wild Apricot, and here it is, renewal due. So on my spreadsheet, I called it renewal date. On Wild Apricot, it's called renewal due. You can still transfer that information the same way, you just have to make sure it's mapped properly. So those are all going to go in just fine. And we'll just scroll down really quickly. I think the rest of these are all set up correctly. I'll just show you quickly. Yep, all set up to be perfectly fine. And we'll just use for membership level, we'll click add new levels into the system for all new values. That way nobody gets lost. And if they do have some sort of custom membership, it'll still bring that into the system and we can go about editing that later. So this looks good to me. Let's hit next. And it'll just ask for some notes about the import. I usually write, this import was done by Coach Mark. If you have a bunch of people working on your organization and you share responsibilities with other staff, it's always useful to comment on what you're doing. That way everybody can see, oh, this import was done by Coach Mark. You see, it sounds easy enough, but it can be infinitely useful later. And of course, down here, it didn't take any time at all. There were no errors. And in total, it created 27 new records, including 18 new members. And you can go ahead and click this to see exactly what was brought in. These are all the new people that were imported today on July 9th, 2018. 27 new people. Here's all the kind of information we captured from them. Let's just click one just so we can see an example. We'll click on Stephen Brown here. Well, you can see a couple of the fields I brought in, such as salutation for Stephen Brown. We even brought in his existing membership status with the renewal date. So you can see up here, his renewal's been overdue for quite some time. And yeah, all of the information that we previously had about Stephen Brown is now brought into Wild Apricot. We didn't lose anything. We brought the exact same dates over, the same family members. Look, this Stephen Brown here is a bundle member, and he's part of an unlimited bundle, who the administrator is Mike Brown. So you can see that not only can you bring in individual members, but you can bring in existing family memberships. In this case, Stephen's part of Mike's bundle. We could make him the administrator if we wanted, but I think Mike should be consulted about that first. But yeah, hopefully that gives you some confidence on the ability to bring in all of your information into Wild Apricot. And of course, like I said, you can do bulk changes with this just as easily, and I can help out with that. If you just want to reach out to me offline, we'll make sure that that gets done for you as well. We're approaching the end of the session, so let's just go through a couple more things. I've been talking about these a lot, the system fields. The system fields don't need to be created by you. They're things that exist already in Wild Apricot. So if you have things like renewal dates, membership types, membership status, email, you'll just want to assign them to the right place on Wild Apricot. So what this kind of means is that these are all things that are used by the automation to be able to automatically send emails or determine whether or not somebody has access to their or wants to grant access to others about their profile. It also has things like their password or event announcements, opt-in, for example. And these are things that you don't have to create, but you'll want to make sure they match up to any of the data you are importing. So for example, email is required for member login. That's why it's a system field. Your members cannot log in if they don't have an email address. So it's something that needs to be built into the system. And then these ones that are highlighted right now, for example, these are used to import existing memberships. So you'll need to know whether it's enabled, what level it is, when they joined, when the renewal date is, and what the active status of their membership is as it goes forward. So you'll want to do something to match these system fields as best as possible, and using that export method I talked about earlier will certainly give you a list of all of these fields on the spreadsheet. That's why I recommend it. But otherwise, there are detailed descriptions about this on the handout and on the help site, all about system fields. So if you do find yourself getting stuck or wanting to maximize the import, I do recommend just taking a look at these. Then lastly, I want to talk about what can be imported into Wild Apricot and what cannot be imported into Wild Apricot. So you'll see here an example of a bunch of information that is able to be processed and imported into Wild Apricot automatically. So names, join expiry dates, what types of member they are, what their privacy preferences are. So whether or not they want to be contacted through email by the administrators, or if they do not want to be contacted, you can import all of that. You can also import the actual groups they belong to as well. And then it gets a little bit more specific. If you have custom or organization specific data, like what's your favorite color, or how did you like our last picnic, then you can import that too. That'll all go into the system just fine. It will create new fields for them, new places where that data will be archived and recorded on the system. So it's all possible to import. And I think what's most important is the couple of things that you cannot import into Wild Apricot. Namely, these are historic payments. And so if somebody has a bunch of membership payments from 1 or 2 years ago, you will not be able to take those records in unless you want to insert them manually onto Wild Apricot, which I don't really recommend. It's the kind of thing that going forward, everything will be stored in the system and allocated properly, but you won't be able to take those invoices or emails or payments from the past. You won't be able to insert or import photos or avatars, unfortunately. That's something that must be done manually or by the member themselves. And the last thing you cannot import is old credit card information. So you can't take your existing memberships with their old card, and even if you do know the numbers and all of the expiry dates, you can't put that into the system and start billing it. It must be reauthorized by the member themselves. They can put recurring payments on that and they can store their card in the new system, but you can't take the old values and go forward that way. I'm just going to double check the questions here. It looks like we have kept up with almost all of them, and hopefully everybody has seen the answers that we are providing. It was really the goal of this bootcamp to be able to answer questions on the fly and make sure everybody felt really comfortable. And hopefully after it's done, you can go and play around with your Wild Apricot account a little bit and see if any of this has transferred over into practical skills for you. And what's more important is that you know you have help available in the form of us, the Wild Apricot support and coaching team. We want to help, and we really do want to hear from you. So if there's anything that you felt wasn't answered today or that you'd like to go over a little bit privately, just send us an email, and I'll actually show you how you can do that. If you are a paid Wild Apricot account, you have access to the full technical support that I mentioned earlier, which means at any time you can send in a support ticket to support@wildapricot.com, or you can give us a call. The number's up on the screen. It's 1-877-493-6090. And of course, that line is manned during business hours on Eastern Time. So from 9:30 to 5:30, if you call in, then you will get one of us lovely apricots, and we'll be more than happy to help walk you through whatever problem you are dealing with. And of course, the other thing that I want to kind of help out with is that the help page itself is what taught me to use Wild Apricot in the first place. When I originally applied for a job here, they said, go look at the help site and see if you can make your own site. It was kind of a test to see if I was right for the position. And sure enough, the help site really helped me out. I spent a couple of hours that night reading it, and I was able to transfer a lot of the skills directly into actually building a test account. And I really have nothing but nice things to say about it, because there are thousands of guides, there are thousands of pictures and videos, and essentially when you think about it, it's on-demand help anytime, anywhere. And I like to say that you could even get this Wild Apricot help from the space station, because it's true. I do believe they have an internet connection on the space station, which means they could go and get help with their Wild Apricot account. I would think they might have some better things to do, but who knows? Maybe they are extremely community-minded up there and want to keep tabs of their organization. Lastly, before we get finished for the day, if you want a copy of that handout, try and download it again now. You can do it by clicking the GoToWebinar handout dropdown and then clicking day1handout.pdf. That'll bring a preview up on your screen that you can then save to your computer. Just viewing the preview doesn't save it automatically to your computer, so make sure that you either right-click and save as, or click the save button in the top right of that preview. And if you don't get it, it is your last chance for now, but otherwise I will be giving a copy of that on Friday to everybody. Or if it's something that you really couldn't figure out and you're looking for, just send us an email, support@wildapricot.com, and we'll be happy to give you that handout. And then lastly, again, just because this question comes up all the time about how to get a discount on Wild Apricot, what I recommend is if you're looking for a discount, there's a 10% discount for prepaying 1 year. There's 15% if you can prepay 2 years, and this can really save you tons and tons and tons of money down the line. Many of you, in fact, when I quickly looked at the registration, a lot of you have been with Wild Apricot for more than 2 years already. So if you've already been here this long, you might as well save some money for the future. And if you are in a trial and you're looking to upgrade your account, you can do it in the same place. You just go to Dashboard and Account, and you can go month to month, or you can go ahead and get the discount by doing 1 or 2 year prepayments. But otherwise, that's it for day one. By now, everybody has a good idea of where and how they can do their importing. They know what membership management means, how they can create levels, what kind of options exist for the levels, how membership group works, and also how you can add extra charges to accounts. So all of that should really help you create some cool stuff for the future. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing 2 different things. We're going to be talking about how online payments tie into your Wild Apricot account, and also how event management works. So if you are interested in either of those topics, I really look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And otherwise, it's been a pleasure having everybody here today. Thanks so much for being here for day 1 of the boot camp. We got 4 more to go, and I can already tell this is a great class that we have this week. There are tons of questions coming in, and we just want to keep them coming. So if we missed you today, we're so sorry. We're going to hear from you. We want to hear from you after. Email us at coaches@wildapricot.com. And otherwise, have a really great day. Thanks so much. Bye-bye for now.